This channel is supported by Truefire. Truefire is an online library
enough, you can get the Truefire All Access Pass for as cheap as they ever do it, the $99 thing. So just jump and do that if you're looking for the best price that you can get Truefire All Access for.
Okay, I don't think I've ever talked about this on the channel, but I feel a little bit sad today because, well, essentially I started, Gibson put up this video with Joe Bonamassa. Joe Bonamassa was talking about how he basically feels like it's better to play without in-ear monitors and just find like a place on the stage where it's not so loud for your ears. And this is something that I've had quite like a troubled life with, because I've never really talked about this on the channel, but for I think like about the first 3-4 years of my life, I was basically kind of deaf, or at least like very, very shit hearing. And this like affected me kind of through primary school. I can remember sort of sitting in like maths classes. I could read before I got to school, stuff like that, but maths was a thing that I had to kind of learn at school. And you just see like writing on the whiteboard and stuff like that, but I couldn't hear what the teacher was saying, so it didn't mean anything to me. So like maths and stuff like that I found really difficult at school, and basically through primary school I didn't really have great hearing. To catch up with maths, my parents paid for me to go and do some like classes outside of school, which basically involved like, it was called Kumon Maths, which was basically just doing like just simple arithmetic to get confident at it, basically was how it worked. For some reason that seemed to help. Says this thing, and I'm kind of thinking about it, like looking up hearing and stuff like that, and thinking, well, first of all, what I guess a lot of you guys might be thinking, and also I saw Mike Venart from Oceanside, a band I absolutely love, kind of was, because Joe Bonamassa was saying that like in-ear monitors, there's no way to escape from the sound, like they're there, and Mike said, well, you can just turn the whole mix down. And I was going to make a video kind of talking about that and being careful with our hearing, and then, you know, thinking, like what I do live with in-ear monitors, which is like have them barely on. So mostly what's happening is that hopefully the in-ears are blocking out some of the loud damaging sounds and stuff like that. Then I kind of found this audiocheck.net, which might be interesting for some of you guys, or it might not be. You might not want to know, because for me it's made me like a little bit sad. So it just checked like where can I still hear? So if you don't know, basically age takes your hearing gradually anyway. So and I don't know if for me I ever had terribly good hearing anyway, because I had a lot of infections in my inner ear as a kid. So I was doing this test, and I got my wife to check, and so she can hear like still like 17, 18k. By the way, go check out Nemo and Crew. I've mentioned this the other day, but my wife, if you're into hats, custom embroidery, pet stuff, then Nemo and Crew is the name of that, and that's what she does, as well as singing and stuff like that. I don't tend to mention it that much, but I probably should. She could hear like 18k. I was finding it like 14, 15k. So that's already like before I'm like 36, and you know, I think probably some of you guys watching this will still be able to hear above that level. Some might be slightly worse. I asked my brother, who's a year older than me, he can hear at 16k according to these tests. And none of this is totally scientific, of course, but you know, if you've got someone in the room next to you who can hear the things that you can't, even though they've maybe, like my wife, gigged and toured and doesn't tend to use ear protection on gigs, complains about ringing ears and stuff like that. And so I kind of feel like I've been quite careful with ear protection, but even so, my ears are still starting to sort of just decline anyway. I think it's just one of those things that I think we take it for granted until often it's too late. So like the amount of times that you might have come back from a gig and you're like, oh, my ears are ringing. Or I think about like that pedal show where like constantly that dB meter above their shoulders is, you know, flashing 105 or whatever like that, and you think, well, that can't be good. And anyway, I did ask D'Addario if they wanted to sponsor this video. I'm not sure if they said yes or not, but I think to me it's just reinforced the idea that I need to be really careful with the hearing that I do have left, because it's just one of those things like that we just like hand health, where I think we only really start to think about it when it becomes a problem. And this was another thing I talked about with D'Addario, like where if you're using like heavier gauge strings and stuff like that, you know, as we get a bit older, like maybe it's just sensible to start preemptively rather than when it's too late, start to adjust for these things that are changing as we get a bit older, whether that means moving down half a string gauge, which D'Addario do in between gauges, which I think is actually quite a good idea to start, you know, scaling things down. Maybe preemptively, you know, if you've got no problems with this at all, then maybe that's fine too. But like if I think of someone like Alan Holdsworth, who was still playing really well into his 70s, and the fact that he was using gauge 8 strings probably, you know, is something to think about there. Now, D'Addario, they offer a few different earbuds. These ones, they're called D-Bud. And these are quite clever in that I believe the story with these is that they have a slider on them. So maybe I'll show you this up close, that you can actually change how much they attenuate by. So standard attenuation, it does show you across the ear. Also, this is an interesting thing for me. There was a study that they did of chinchillas. And for me, what I feel like a lot of us, certainly for me, I feel like it's like cymbals, snare drums that really, to me, are like, ow, that hurts my ears. And those are the sorts of things that I would sort of associate with damage. But it's actually the lower frequencies, according to this study of chinchillas. Like, there must be a bunch of chinchillas out there now with hearing damage. It's a bit of a cruel test, to be honest with you, innit? But yeah, the lower frequencies actually are the ones that can be more damaging, which is surprising to me. But anyway, so D'Addario have these things, which I think, what's it saying on here? They attenuate standard. So they've got a slider on them, so they're adjustable. And this is another thing that I find, your ears adjust quite quickly to having some protection in them. So the very minimum protection that I tend to stick in my ears is tissue, which is not a great idea, but that can apparently attenuate by about 7 dB. With the slider down, these will attenuate by 12 dB, but it ranges across the spectrum here. Down it's 12 dB, and then with it up, it will go all the way to 24 dB. I just think like having a sensible pair of earplugs. The slider's now up. Slider down. I can't tell which is actually quieter, to be honest with you. But at a bare minimum, like to have a set of earphones, particularly if you're going to be gigging, I think is essential. And playing in a room with a loud amp, it doesn't take as much, I think, as you or we might think to actually cause hearing damage. And if age is going to take this from us anyway, I think it's absolutely essential that we start to think, you know, no more gigs where you've got no ear protection at all. And yeah, for me, I've not been using earplugs recently because I've been using in-ear monitors. But another thing, like I say, if I don't have anything, I will still stick tissue in my ears, which I'm not sure that does much, but it does feel better than nothing at all. And again, have a pair of earplugs ready. If you're using in-ear monitors, then for me, I turn those really far down. I've heard people talk, you say, oh, I can't hear the drums, like a drummer playing behind their kit itself, and they got in-ear monitors, and then they put the drums back in their in-ear monitors, which to me sort of indicates that you've got the in-ear monitors up quite high, which I presume is one of those things, again, like in-ear monitors can be loud enough, they're right in your ear canal, and like Joe Bonamassa says, like, potentially there's a cause for damage there. You can't get away from the sound, you can't shield yourself from it at all, but at the same time, I think that might be less now. Yeah, at the same time, you can just turn it way down, and just, that's what I try to do, is have it as low as possible and then start to creep it up. And like a frog going into a pan of water, you kind of find that actually your ears adjust quite well to having less sound in general. Do you know what I mean? Like, you don't need to have your IEMs absolutely blaring. Anyway, I thought it was important to talk about, as I was a little bit sad about that today. I hope your ears are better than mine. Again, I've heard people talk about tinnitus. I've heard musicians talk. I think Bukovac talked about certain things. I think Tom Quayle has talked about one of his ears being pretty dodgy. I mean, Beethoven went deaf. It's just like the unfortunate sort of fate of a musician. Like, in-ear infections and stuff like that can cause deafness. I guess the thing for me to get checked out might be like wax build-up. I'm also sort of curious. Maybe it'd be worth like getting my like actual balance sort of tested. Like, is there certain dips and bits and pieces in my hearing? I don't really know. But yeah, I came into this world slightly deaf, or quite deaf, and it looks like, at some point it's going to continue to sort of trail off, and it's depressing, but it just is what it is, right? So I'm going to do what I can to take precautions, continue doing that, and I would encourage you to do the same. But hopefully your hearing's better than mine.